Hello, I'm David Allen, and today I'm speaking to our leader, Henry Bolton. Henry, how has it been for you dealing with this incessant pressure, for weeks on end?
Yeah,
how are you still here?
I'm still here because I believe it's the right thing. It's interesting, when I was in Helmand, I spent 27 months in Helmand, and in that time, the US Marine Corps, who I was with, rotated 5 times. And there was a colonel in the Marine Corps. He said, Henry, he said, I just don't get it. We're having to change our Marines over every 6 months. He said, you're just here throughout the whole thing. And he said, how do you do it? And because there's a job to be done. And, honestly, David, if I thought that the best way of supporting the cause of regaining our independence, full independence from the European Union, if that cause was best served by me standing down, then I would. But I believe that UKIP absolutely has to be on the battlefield. And if we now go through a leadership contest, then we are off that battlefield for at least 5 months. Okay, and I'm not prepared to put the party in that position.
Yeah, let's try and bring people a little more up to date. What happened at that NEC meeting?
Well, I was given the opportunity to make an opening statement, and then each NEC member was given the opportunity to ask me a couple of questions, which they did, and I answered. There was then a vote then they wanted to discuss the options that were open to them. And a vote was taken as to whether or not I should be in the room or not when that discussion took place. The vote went against me, about 9 against and 5 for, 9 saying that I should leave the room. So I left the room. And I suppose for about an hour and a half they discussed their options. I have no idea what was discussed during that time. And then I was invited back into the room, and there was a vote, the vote of no confidence, and they all voted against me. There was one vote in support of me, and that was my own.
What were the charges against you?
Well, I don't know. That was an interesting point. I think three times during that meeting, I asked, well, first of all, I laid out what I saw as the challenges that a vote of no confidence would create for the party. I talked about the financial risk that it would put the party in, and also the political risk. Because when you think about the timeline, David, what the NEC have embarked upon now is a course of action that will lead to an EGM on the 17th of February. There has to be an NEC election by the end of February. Then we have a leadership contest. If I'm not kept on as the leader after the EGM, we'd have a leadership contest, which will then result in a leadership election around about April or May. And then we've got the local government elections in May. Now, this timeline for any political party would be massively challenging. But for us, a small party in terms of its infrastructure and resources, including financial resources and planning resources, that's a massive challenge. It is, again, going to take us right off the battlefield for that entire period of time. And much as though I very much regret the situation that we're in as a party at the moment, if we are going to do that to ourselves, well, frankly, there's not much hope for the future. The NEC's priority, in my view, should not be worrying about, whether or not the leader should be held accountable for something that somebody else did, but actually about the unity, cohesion, and delivery of politics.
So did any member of the NEC give you a reason as to why they were going to propose a vote of no confidence?
Well, yes, David, there were a couple of reasons given. There was no unified reason, none whatsoever, although I think I asked, as I say, 3 times. One said because I'd left my wife, and therefore the implication being that I wasn't fit to lead the party. Another one criticised my knowledge of economic theories.
And that was it?
And that was it. I was asked, well, do you think that if this had happened at the height of the leadership election campaign, you would have been elected? There were, a variety of comments, but those were the only 2 concrete reasons levelled at me for why I wasn't able to, I couldn't lead the party. But actually, if the party works as a team, we bring all the skills to the table. But indeed, there are not many people, as she was trying to imply that I didn't have the commercial sector background. But my counter to that is, fine, but there are very few people in this whole country that can talk with the same authority that I can talk with in terms of defence, internal security, policing, international diplomacy and foreign affairs.
Okay. Now, what happened was the NEC voted almost unanimously against you, and then spokesperson after spokesperson resigned.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, first of all, those spokespersons, frankly, you know, if they want to say to me, look, Henry, we think that the situation's so bad that you should step down, then that's fine. They've got every right to express themselves in that way, I think. But their first loyalty should be to the party. And by resigning, when senior people in the party resign, of course, they disrupt the smooth running of the party. The party needs to keep functioning. It needs to keep delivering its politics and working on its policy development. And these are the people who are responsible for that. And so by stepping down, they're actually leaving a vacuum there. Because I'm absolutely, as I've said before, absolutely certain that whilst nobody would wish the party to be in the situation it is now, a leadership contest at this point would be utterly silly.
What's kept you going? Surely it would have been easier to just resign with so much seemingly against you.
Yeah, it would have been easier, but I'm not in this for myself, David. I mean, not in any way. I mean, I need this job like a hole in the head. We've got a job to do, and anything that disrupts that needs to be swept aside. I need to pursue this. I just think it's the right thing to do. In terms of personally, yeah, of course it's hard. And some of the vile criticism that I've received online and through letters through the post, you know, it's not pleasant. And the hounding of the media, that's not pleasant either. And not just hounding of me, as I implied earlier, of a lot of people that are very close to me. But you know what? It's about strength of character. It's about being clear as to what the priorities are. And in this case, the priority is very clearly to put the party on the battlefield so that we can regain our independence from the European Union in all areas of government and administration. That's my focus, 110%. Everything else, off to one side. So I'm focused on that goal.
Now, I've detected with the campaign that's against you, is that the mantra has changed a bit. It's actually moved away from the difficulties you had in your personal relationship. The allegations now seem to be centred about you've been leader for 4 months and you haven't done anything. Now, I mean, I can count as well. For the last 3 weeks, everything stopped because of the publicity furore.
Well, it's not actually all stopped, David. It's made it a little bit more difficult for me to move around, and of course I've had to address some media issues, but actually I'm still pursuing the same agenda that I was on before, and maybe we can talk about that a bit later.
I'm certainly going to come to that. The issue is Christmas always takes 2 weeks out of anything because nothing happens, and it takes a fortnight to find out kind of what's going on in the party. So by my calculation, you probably had about 2.5 months, but people have been saying, well, what on earth have you been doing? Now's your opportunity to tell them.
Well, yeah, quite a lot. Before the leadership election, before the conference, during the hustings, I had obviously travelled around the country as part of the hustings programme. I had made the pledge that immediately after being elected leader, I would embark on another tour of the country to talk to members in more detail about their concerns, about the programme of change that I wanted to implement and so on. I also pledged that I would get to grips with the internal communications problems that the party has had. I think everybody knows in the party that internal communications have not been good for the last year or more. And those were two key issues that I had to address. So let's talk about those now. I have visited, now if I can remember all of them off the top of my head, Bridgend, Newport, the Cardiff Assembly, Great Yarmouth, Hartlepool, Bolton, Birmingham, Scarborough, Tiverton, Guildford, London, Folkestone, my home branch, of course, and there are a number of others, probably about another 4 or 5, which I can't recall off the top of my head. Now that's quite a tour to do, and a meeting with members. A lot of these were regionally organized. Derby was another one. A lot of these were regional meetings with 100, 160 people present. Very, very good, and very useful for me, and I hope useful for the people who I met. In addition to that, I initiated a digital transformation strategy, which is now complete in terms of the planning. That's about new email systems, it's about a new party website, a new platform for branch websites, it's about discussion fora to support policy development, a whole range of things within that whole transformation to totally, in the electronic side, transform our entire internal communications.
What about the party funding?
Those are the two things that I said I would engage in, and that's what I've been engaging in there. In terms of other things that happened, when I moved into the leadership, obviously I became aware of the financial situation of the party, which has been not particularly transparent for members up till now, and I was frankly appalled. It was in a very, very poor situation. And it had been for a year or so or more before I became leader. And the NEC, they are responsible for the financial management of the party. And there is a financial subcommittee of the NEC under the chairmanship of the Treasurer who are responsible for making sure that our finances are in good shape. But we've been running on a monthly deficit of tens of thousands of pounds throughout the last year before I became leader. So I had to fix the leaking holes in the bucket, and I had to maximise revenue somehow. And that was also an implied requirement of donors as well, because they were, every month the party had been going to them and saying, please could you help us to make it through the next month? So they were trickle feeding sort of survival money to the party rather than the party fixing its finances. So this all needed to be changed. And that's something that I embarked upon. But I have no actual authority. As the leader, I have no authority to make those things happen. So I had to work through the NEC. And in the time that I've been leader, there have only been 3 NEC meetings. And indeed, it has been quite challenging to bring key members of the NEC on board in this respect. So it's been a much slower process than I'd have wanted. In addition, I mentioned about maximising the income. One of the things that we've done is, obviously people are aware that we've raised the subscription charges. And with time, I would like to see them maybe brought down again, and we're still adjusting. So there are some elements of it that are not written in stone. But I explained the situation to the NEC, and the entire NEC unanimously voted in support of that rise in subscription fees. So, and again, that was an implied requirement of donors to do that. So all of these things have had to be addressed in, as you say, what is in reality 2.5 months, and it's a hell of a lot. Now,
when did you sleep?
Well, very little. I mean, I've always been one of these people who's required sort of between 7.5 and 8 hours sleep a night. I'm probably now, and I have been throughout this, surviving on somewhere between 4 and 6.5 hours, and I've adapted to it. But that's not, and it's 7 days a week. We're here doing this on a Sunday. Sunday media, the Sunday political programs and so on. So no, it's a 7-day-a-week, pretty much 365 days a year, but 24/7 job. And I don't have any problem with that. I mean, it was the same for me in Helmand or in the Boltons. I mean, I have no difficulty with that whatsoever. So I'm just cracking on and trying to get the job done. And over the coming weeks, indeed, I have absolutely nothing is going to take my eye off that ball, because if we can't sort out our internal communications, our finances and so on, if we can't do that, we are never going to have a platform capable of supporting us in the delivery of our politics.
Okay. What are your plans for the party, Henry?
Well, first of all, get that sorted out. Later this coming week, I'm going to be embarking again on another tour around the country. Not only speaking to members, but actually as a rallying call for all of the Leave campaigns to mobilise and coordinate their effort to counter what is an increasing Remain campaign. We see the government at every turn taking every opportunity to water down Brexit. And this is why I've said a few times, I've used the word independence, because I think the government has done a very good job at twisting the meaning of the word Brexit. We didn't vote simply to leave the European Union. We voted to leave the European Union in order to get our full independence back. Theresa May has sort of wordsmithed it to mean just simply leaving. Leaving, in her books, clearly does not mean getting our independence back. And that's the core. So I want to go around and make that rallying cry, we want our independence back. Not just leaving the European Union. This country must be independent from Brussels once we've left.
In the absence of a figure like Nigel Farage, who was an exceptional frontman for the party, how do you see the party projecting policies and being effective?
Well, you know, one of the other things I've been working on is trying to develop the policy-making mechanisms and the advisory groups within the party, and one in particular, as you know, David, has been quite successful. But again, you know, this is something that I asked party spokesmen to start working on. There have been very few that have done that, so we've got to grip that. We've got to get that policy in place, and then we've got the concrete policies to take forward. Now, I've got, actually ironically, on the back of all of this recent media attention, we've got now bids from a lot of national media going out for the next 2-3 months for me to appear talking specifically politics. Not about my private life at all, specifically on political issues.
Do you think those invitations would remain there if you weren't leader?
No, I don't believe they would. Absolutely, I don't believe they would. Partly because we won't know who the leader's going to be if I step down or am removed in the EGM, and also partly because it is on the back of the media appearances that I have done. So I now have a profile that has caught the interest. Now, you mentioned Nigel. Nigel, of course, has a role to play going forward as well. Nigel is a charismatic, well-known figure, and he is therefore a resource of political value for us. And indeed, he needs to be part of this going forward. And we've already had some discussions about it. There are all sorts of rumours going around, which I would discount. But nonetheless, he and other high-profile figures in the party have a great role to play in part of the team effort taking forward the independence campaign.
So in this process, which has been started by the NEC, in your view, how do you see this going?
Well, I mean, constitutionally, the NEC has no power to remove the leader. They only, as you say, they instigate a constitutional process that leads to the EGM. The members elect the leader, and only the members can remove the leader through an EGM process. So that's what I'm following. I'm simply adhering to the constitutional process in this, that the NEC initiated against advice because of the political and financial risk. But anyway, they've initiated it. It's their right to initiate it. So I'm just carrying on with the job until then. I have every intention of continuing the job beyond that, but it is a question for the members.
Now, even I know, and many people know, there's been an extraordinary amount of vitriol, and it appeared, even maybe just a week or a week and a half ago, particularly with the spokespeople standing down, that the whole world was against you. What's your reading of kind of what's happening with the general feeling surrounding the whole issue?
Well, you say that the whole world was against me. What happened was that the world reacted. Actually, it's quite interesting. There's a lot of support coming from abroad as well. But what people reacted to, I think, in the party was the NEC vote of no confidence and the resignations that you've already mentioned. But these have been influenced by other forces who have been working very hard behind the scenes, and indeed some of them since before I became leader, to undermine the leader's position, and also to should we say enhance their own profile within the party. Now I think people are starting to the emotion of that initial media fest and the vote of no confidence, I think is passing. People are now looking at it a little bit more analytically, and they are seeing that there's a little bit more to this than meets the eye, and indeed that our priorities should not be on whether I've left my wife or whether I've had a relationship with somebody else. They should be on actually what the party is here to do, and that's to make sure that our independence is gained and that we make a success of our independence going forward. So I think people are now starting to, think a bit more clearly after the shock of the initial information that came out.
Well, let me give you one sentence to speak to the members that are going to go to the EGM. One sentence, tell the membership why they should vote for you.
Well, I mean, David, I'm afraid it's not going to be one sentence. It might be two or three.
Okay.
Because there are some really solid reasons. At the end of September, when I was elected leader, the whole party and all the external commentators absolutely agreed on one thing, and that is that the party could not politically, or indeed perhaps financially, afford another leadership contest. People seem to have forgotten that, but the situation has not changed in that regard. Secondly, I have not changed. All of my leadership experience and skills, and all of my character, strength of character, and my resilience are being deployed in ensuring that this party is a success and can deliver its politics. And thirdly, think about the priorities here. Are the priorities, and I am absolutely, I bitterly regret the fact that people in the party have taken a bit of a hit over all of this. Absolutely, and that's I am sorry for that. But actually, we were set up not to act as a court of moral, decision making over whether or not a leader should be with his wife, or whether not, or whether he entered into a relationship or not, and whether that's good. But we are about making sure that this country is confident, optimistic, and prosperous and secure going forward. And why on earth would we want to divert ourselves from that core purpose and disappear down the rabbit hole of worrying about my personal life? I am 110% committed to delivering for this party. I always have been, and I always shall be.
One of the interesting things about our constitution and what has actually been arranged is that effectively, if the membership support you, our current NEC has to stand down.
Correct.
Do you, in a sense?
Well, it's not entirely correct. There has to be an NEC election within 3 months. So they don't actually have to stand down as such, but there has to be another election. But in addition to that, it's important to say, and I've said it before, that a lot of as leader, I am almost powerless constitutionally. Almost everything I do has to be cleared through the NEC, and it is difficult. The NEC constitutionally has the role of executive, but also the role to provide oversight and accountability as to how the party is governed. So they actually are responsible for providing oversight and accountability of themselves. And that, of course, is a conflict. And that is a conflict that I think must be addressed. The fact that the leader cannot lead because of the constitutional construct of the NEC, and not just me, Paul Nuttall, Diane James briefly, and Nigel, have all had problems of this sort. So it is high time that we changed. And I actually stood for the leadership on a platform of change, reforming the NEC. I've been on record during the hustings and since in saying that I believe that the NEC should be elected by the regions, so regional representation on the NEC. The NEC should elect its own chairman, and it should be a board of trustees rather than an executive. Okay. There should be a political a professional platform, human resources, logistics, finance, and so on, IT, communications, that support the delivery of politics. And that professional, purely professional, apolitical platform should be staffed as such. And it should support the leader and the delivery of politics, and the policies and the delivery of politics should be under the leader. So you've got the leader supported by the professional platform and with the oversight and accountability provided by the Board of Trustees.
Okay. Henry, the quirk of our constitution and the way this has all been set up, it really is a question of voting for you or voting for the NEC. If the membership vote for you, and support you against the motion of no confidence, then there has to be a new NEC elected, although the existing NEC remain in place until that election has taken place.
Yes.
In a sense, this is kind of a golden opportunity to reform the party more quickly than it could have been done any other way. What's your take on that?
No, absolutely. And I've already said that I think reform of the NEC, constitutional reform is required, and reform of the NEC as part of that. And absolutely, it is the opportunity. Technically, legally, that the EGM is not an us or them type of vote, but in practice, of course, that is the case. What the NEC have done is they have basically created a situation in which the leader is pitted against the NEC, and this is a leader that absolutely wants to pursue reform of the party. That reform of the party will not happen if the party does not take this opportunity now.
Do you think you'll win?
I am pretty confident, yes. I'm not a betting man though, David, so...
Henry Bolton, thank you very much.
Thank you.